The gavel detonated, and Judge Ruth Calder said, "Order," as water trembled in pitchers. A gasp tore the gallery, and Kayla Monroe's pen froze mid-word. On the stand, Dominic Rivas whispered, "It isn't his signature," and the room iced over. Morgan Hale felt her ribs tighten like a vice, and Elise Pratt said, "Breathe, look only at me." A juror's knuckles blanched against wood, while a paper cup toppled, coffee puddling like a bruise. Victor Lang said, "Your Honor, we object to this ambush," but his voice faltered. Morgan said, "If it's forged, I never saw it," and the words tasted like rust. The bailiff stepped forward, as whispers split into rumors. Judge Calder said, "Mr. Rivas, speak clearly for the record," and time lurched. Dominic said, "The will was altered after death, and the truth cracked the air." The corridor hummed with recycled air and bad coffee while Elise said, "They will try to brand you a conspirator." Morgan tasted copper and said, "My father died thinking I could fix this family." Victor strode past and said, "See you inside," without looking. A deputy's boots clicked, counting down courage. Morgan remembered the night the will surfaced, a fax that felt like a fuse. Elise said, "Truth is a blade, not a blanket, so we cut clean." Morgan said, "If Dominic flips, they will bury me under his shadow." A camera light blinked red, and Kayla said, "Off the record. Who benefits if the signature dies?" Morgan said nothing, but the silence screamed. "Back in court," Victor said. The heiress stood to gain everything. And the word, everything, swallowed the oxygen. Elise said, "Speculation is not evidence," and slid a folder forward like a shield. Morgan heard chairs creak like warnings. Judge Calder said, "Counsel, stay tethered to the record." Dominic stared at the oath card as if it were a trapdoor. Morgan said, "I never asked for this empire," and the gallery tilted with whispers. Victor said, "Then why accept the executor's pen?" and smiled like a blade. Elise said, "Because grief writes terrible captions," and the jury blinked. The rain thickened against the windows like a verdict no one wanted. From the back row, Evelyn Carr said, "Family deserves closure," into a reporter's recorder, and the word, "family," curdled. Kayla said, "Did Leonard confide doubts about Morgan?" and ink scratched like claws. Morgan felt the stare of bloodline and debt, a ledger graved in bone. Elise said, "Ignore the theater," but the theater had teeth. Dominic rubbed his temple and said, "They pushed me to notarize late, then swallowed regret." Judge Calder said, "Counsel, control your supporters," and the gallery stilled in slices. Victor said, "Let the record reflect a pattern of manipulation." Morgan said, "The pattern is grief," and her voice steadied. In the restroom mirror, Morgan said, "What if the truth is not enough?" and the fluorescent hum answered. Water traced cold lines on her wrists like signatures, refusing to dry. Elise entered and said, "Enough is a verdict we earn scene by scene." Morgan said, "He altered it after death. But who gave the order?" Elise said, "Find the hand that held the pen and the mouth that fed it." Outside, footsteps swelled like a tide called recess over. Morgan said, "I will not be the villain of their family myth." Elise said, "Then write your own ending." And the mirror offered a steadier face. The cross-examination bled tension as Victor said, "Mr. Rivas, you swore this will was genuine last spring." Dominic wiped his brow and said, "I was misled, but not by her." Elise rose, calm steel, and said, "Objection, Your Honor, counsel misstates." Judge Calder lifted her gaze, voice sharp as glass, sustained, "Stay to the question." Morgan's chest pressed tight. Every breath felt like an accusation. Victor said, "Did you notarize after hours, behind closed doors?" Dominic said, "Yes, but only because they forced the timing." The gallery murmured like a hive, and Kayla scribbled, knowing headlines waited. Morgan whispered, "They will hang me by his hesitation," and Elise whispered back, "Then we break their rope." The projector whirred as Victor said, "Exhibit B, the original signature," and the screen glowed with ink stretched across paper. Elise said. Compare the pressure points, they fracture mid-stroke. A juror leaned closer, eyes narrowing. Morgan felt heat on her neck as the gallery leaned into the spectacle. Dominic said, "Those strokes don't match the ones I witnessed." Victor said, "So you admit perjury?" Elise snapped, "Or he admits the truth was buried under threats." Judge Calder's hammer eyes pinned them both. Morgan whispered, "They're dismantling me by image alone," and Elise whispered, "Then we teach them to see cracks, not signatures." The storm rattled windows as Kayla whispered into her recorder. The cracks in testimony grow deeper. "In the box," Trent said softly. "It doesn't add up, though no one should have heard." Morgan's pulse thudded. Her eyes darted to Elise. Elise said, "They will weaponize every doubt, so anchor yourself." Victor smirked, shuffling papers like a gambler. Judge Calder said, "We will recess for 15 minutes, and the gavel fell softer this time but no less heavy. Morgan pressed palms together and said, 15 minutes feels like a noose tightening. Elise said, or a rope to climb. In the hallway, cameras flared like gunfire. Reporters shouted, "Did you forge it, Morgan?" She kept her chin high, though her stomach curled. Elise raised a hand and said, "No comment until testimony concludes." Kayla pushed forward and said, "But your father's fortune shifts on ink." Victor walked past, lips curved, and said, "Truth writes itself." Morgan said, "Then let the ink spill." And the cameras devoured her words. A flash burst painted her in white flame, and her silence afterward screamed louder than denial. Elise said, "Strength isn't volume, it's survival." Morgan whispered, "Then I will outlast their hunger." In chambers, the hush pressed like stone. Judge Calder said, "This case will not dissolve into theater," and her eyes burned over the lawyers. Victor said, "We follow the evidence, even if the truth fractures family." Elise said, "We defend against speculation that poisons the record." Morgan stood silent, fingers trembling against the table. Dominic shifted uneasily, avoiding eyes. Judge Calder said, "If either side manipulates the gallery again, sanctions will fall." The silence swelled, thick and suffocating. Morgan thought, "They are not only weighing inheritance, they are weighing me." Elise whispered, "Then give them a weight they cannot lift." The storm outside clawed at the courthouse windows, thunder pressing against the walls as Victor said, "Inheritance is not just property, it's motive." Elise snapped, "You cannot stitch guilt from grief." Morgan's stomach churned as jurors leaned closer, their silence grinding. Dominic's eyes flicked down at the oath card like it burned his hand. Kayla whispered into her recorder, "The room feeds on tension." Judge Calder said, "Restrain yourselves, or I will clear this gallery." Morgan felt the walls tilt, her chest heavy, as if she were standing inside a coffin nailed with questions. Elise whispered, "Stand upright, because they want to see you collapse." Morgan whispered back, "If I collapse, they bury me alive." The jury box shifted like a restless sea, as Trent said softly, "It doesn't feel right," his hand tapping the rail. Victor raised a sheet of paper and said, "Here is the will that seals her fate." Elise said, "And here is the handwriting analysis that unravels it." Morgan's pulse struck her throat like a drum. The jurors leaned in, squinting as though the ink itself could whisper secrets. Judge Calder said, "Proceed, but keep relevance sharp." Kayla scribbled furiously, ink scratching louder than whispers. Dominic exhaled hard and said, "I should never have notarized." Morgan thought, "They are watching my soul through strokes of ink." Elise whispered, "Then let them choke on ink." During recess, the hallway seethed with whispers. Reporters swarmed as microphones stabbed the air. Kayla said, "Does guilt look different in silence?" Morgan pressed her lips shut, skin pale, refusing to give them fire. Elise shielded her and said, "We speak in court, not here." Victor brushed by, smirking. Truth doesn't need rehearsal. Morgan felt the cameras crawling her skin like insects. A deputy said, "Move along, folks." But the crowd pressed closer, hungry for cracks. Morgan whispered, "They are not asking questions. They're carving verdicts." Elise whispered back, "Then keep your skin uncut." Hale's recorder clicked off, but her eyes burned with hunger. Back inside, the defense table bristled with papers. Elise said, "We will dismantle this line by line." Morgan whispered, "What if truth is drowned by spectacle?" Dominic shifted uneasily on the stand and said, "They pressured me, but not her." Victor pounced, "Then name who." Dominic's silence expanded like thunder. Judge Calder said, "Answer, or the court will compel you." Morgan's hands dug into wood, splinters nearly breaking skin. Elise said, "He doesn't fear the truth. He fears the ones behind it." The gallery buzzed, whispers thick as smoke. Morgan thought, if Dominic speaks, the noose shifts, but it may tighten elsewhere. As the day waned, rain softened to drizzle, but tension thickened. Judge Calder said, "We adjourn until morning." Chairs scraped like growls. Kayla muttered into her recorder, "Every silence screams louder than words." Morgan stood, legs heavy, her gaze fixed on the empty witness chair. "Ah." Elise touched her arm and said, "Tomorrow we turn silence into proof." Victor gathered his papers with a smirk, saying nothing, his silence more venomous than words. Dominic slipped away, head bowed, shadow long across the aisle. Morgan whispered, "What if tomorrow delivers a coffin instead of salvation?" Elise whispered, "Then we fight the burial." The courtroom air thickened as Victor said, "Ladies and gentlemen, a second will has surfaced." The gallery gasped, whispers splitting like cracks in glass. Elise rose and said, "Your Honor, this is an ambush." Judge Calder's voice cut through. "Mr. Lang, explain yourself." Victor laid a folder on the lectern, lips curling. "This one leaves everything to Morgan Hale." Morgan's breath seized, her pulse hammering. Dominic's head dropped, muttering, "That's not what I signed." Kayla scribbled furiously, ink biting paper. Elise leaned close and whispered, "They've buried us under another lie." Morgan whispered back, "Then we dig it up." The screen glowed with the new document, signatures projected in merciless scale. Victor said, "Identical strokes yet placed days apart." Elise countered, "Forgeries mirror too perfectly. True hands never repeat." Morgan felt heat crawling her neck as jurors leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Judge Calder said, "Mr. Rivas, compare both signatures aloud." Dominic hesitated, then said, "The second looks traced." The gallery murmured, like a hive ready to swarm. Kayla whispered into her recorder, a forged will turned weapon against its creator. Elise whispered to Morgan, "They built a trap inside a trap." Morgan whispered back, "And they want me caught in both." The recessed break fractured the hallway into chaos. Reporters shouted, "Two wills, two stories, which is truth?" Morgan felt flashbulbs carve her face into fragments. Elise raised her hand, no statements. Victor brushed past, chuckling, "The ink convicts her faster than I could." Kayla said, "Morgan, did your father confide about drafting more than one?" Morgan said nothing, jaw locked, silence screaming louder than words. A deputy pushed the crowd back, voices crashing like thunder. Morgan whispered to Elise, "They are feeding on confusion." Elise whispered back, "Then we must starve them with clarity." Back inside, Dominic's hands shook as Victor said, "Tell the jury which will is genuine." Dominic's eyes darted, sweat darkening his collar. Elise rose, "Your Honor, my witness is under duress." Judge Calder warned, "Answer directly." Dominic's voice cracked, "Neither matches the original draft." Gasps swelled, the gallery buzzing like struck wires. Victor said, "You admit both are false," his tone triumphant. Morgan whispered, "They're rewriting history." Elise whispered back, "Then we force them to face the author." Judge Calder's gavel struck, silencing the noise, but tension still boiled under the wood. As daylight waned, Elise stood before the jury and said, "Two wills, both poisoned. Point not to my client, but to those who profit from chaos." Victor snapped, "Speculation." Judge Calder said, "She may continue." Elise's voice sharpened. Forgery is a mirror, and someone wants you blinded by reflection. Morgan's heart thudded, each beat an echo in the silence. Dominic bowed his head, avoiding every gaze. Kayla whispered into her recorder, "The defense plants seeds of betrayal." Morgan whispered, "What if no one wants to water them?" Elise whispered, "Truth has roots even in poisoned soil." Morning light pushed through storm-streaked windows as Elise said, "Today we sharpen the blade." Morgan whispered, "Every eye is waiting for me to slip." Victor leaned toward the jury and said, "When fortune shifts, motive follows." Judge Calder's gavel rapped once, a warning more than order. Dominic adjusted his tie, avoiding Morgan's gaze, his silence heavy as stone. Kayla whispered into her recorder, "The trial breathes like a predator." Elise placed a hand on Morgan's notes and said, "Let truth be your armor." Morgan whispered back, "If armor cracks, I fall bare before them all." The screen flickered as Elise displayed the original drafts, edges yellowed, signatures faint. She said, "Ink fades, but lies leave scars." Victor shot back, "Or fabrications dressed as history." Morgan's breath caught when the jurors leaned in, eyes narrowing. Dominic said, "That page was never in my presence." Elise said, "Then someone inserted it after death." Judge Calder's voice pressed calm order, "Let the jury decide what is credible." Kayla whispered into her recorder, "The battlefield is now paper and ink." Morgan whispered, "If ink convicts me, words must free me." The gallery murmured as Elise said, "We call Evelyn Carr." Evelyn rose slowly, pearl earrings catching light, eyes steady with secrets. Victor's smile thinned at last, the grieving sister. Evelyn said, "I saw a different will before Leonard died." Gasps spilled like shattered glass. Morgan's pulse pounded, each beat louder than thunder. Elise said, "And was that will left in his own hand?" Evelyn nodded, "Yes, but it vanished after his death." Judge Calder silenced the gallery, her gavel striking like iron. Kayla whispered into her recorder, "The sister turns tide with one confession." Morgan whispered, "Or sinks us deeper." Victor paced, voice sharp, "So your testimony emerges now, years later." Evelyn held his stare, saying, "Truth has no expiry." The gallery hummed like a swarm. Morgan clutched the table edge, nails biting wood. Elise rose, "Your Honor. Attempts to discredit family grief, mock justice itself." Judge Calder narrowed her gaze, "Keep rhetoric to fact." Evelyn's voice softened, "Leonard wanted fairness, not chaos." Kayla whispered into her recorder, "The sister's calm disarms Victor's venom." Morgan whispered, "If they believe her, the shadow shifts." Elise whispered back, "And shadows reveal the hand that cast them." As evening shadows crept in, Elise addressed the jury, "Wills do not change themselves. People change them for greed." Victor objected, "Speculation." Judge Calder said, "Proceed with care." Morgan's throat tightened as Elise held up copies of both wills, pages trembling under the lights. Elise said, "Two mirrors, both cracked, both reflecting lies, and neither born of my client's hand." Silence draped the room heavy as iron. Kayla whispered into her recorder, "The defense casts doubt on every stroke of ink." Morgan whispered, "Doubt is my last ally." Elise whispered, "And sometimes doubt saves lives." The courtroom fell into silence as Elise said, "We begin with truth carved from every lie." Victor rose, voice sharp, or a fairy tale told by a desperate air. Morgan's chest tightened. Every juror's gaze felt like iron chains. Judge Calder warned, "Closing arguments are not theater. Stay tethered to fact." Dominic rubbed his forehead, whispering, "I never meant for this storm." Evelyn's hands twisted together, pearls trembling on her ears. Kayla whispered into her recorder, "The final act sharpens." Morgan whispered, "If this is the end, let me stand tall." Elise whispered, "Then stand taller than their doubt." Victor paced before the jury, voice like a blade, two wills, both leading back to Morgan Hale. Morgan felt her throat tighten as whispers swirled. Elise interrupted, Speculation is not justice. Judge Calder warned. Counsel, keep order. Victor smirked. Her gain is motive carved in ink. Trent shifted in the jury box, eyes narrowing. Dominic muttered, "This is wrong," his words nearly lost. Evelyn's gaze pierced Morgan, pain and suspicion colliding. Kayla whispered, "The prosecution paints greed as destiny." Morgan whispered, "If they believe him, I'm already gone." Elise whispered, "Then we must paint truth sharper." Elise rose, voice clear. 2 wills forged, 2 mirrors cracked, yet one truth remains. Morgan Hale never held the pen. The jury leaned closer, tension heavy. Victor shook his head, muttering, "A rehearsed speech." Judge Calder said, "Allow counsel to finish." Elise held up both wills, pages trembling. Forgery blinds, but it cannot erase intent. Morgan swallowed hard, every nerve alive. Dominic buried his face in his hands. Evelyn whispered, "Leonard wanted peace." Kayla scribbled furiously, capturing every syllable. Morgan whispered, "If her words do not save me, nothing will." Elise whispered back, "Words are our final weapon." Victor thundered, "Even forged wills can reveal intent." Elise snapped, "Intent built on lies is no intent at all." Judge Calder slammed her gavel. "Enough, this is not theater." Morgan's heart pounded, each beat louder than words. Dominic muttered, "It was never her," his voice breaking through the storm. The jury shifted, eyes flickering between witness and defendant. Evelyn's lips trembled, silent but heavy with regret. Kayla whispered, "The trial teeters on one breath." Morgan whispered, "If this falls, so do I." Elise whispered, "Then we make it fall in our favor." As dusk pressed against windows, Judge Calder said, "The jury will deliberate." Chairs scraped, tension rippling. Morgan's breath caught, her body trembling with the weight of silence. Elise whispered, "This is where fate leaves our hands." Victor smiled faintly, as if victory was certain. Dominic sat slumped, shame carving deep lines into his face. Evelyn bowed her head, pearls trembling. Kayla whispered into her recorder, "The storm now moves behind closed doors." Morgan whispered, "If they condemn me, my father's name dies too." Elise whispered, "And if they free you, his truth lives on." The jury filed back into the room, silence so thick it pressed on every chest. Judge Calder said, "Has the jury reached a verdict?" Trent stood, paper trembling in his hand. Morgan's breath caught like glass in her throat. Elise whispered, "No matter what they say, you held the truth." Victor straightened, a shadow of a smile rising. Evelyn clutched her pearls, whispering prayers no one could hear. Dominic stared at the floor, shame dripping like lead. Kayla's recorder light blinked, hungry for history. Trent's voice cracked, "We find," and the air fractured. Trent's voice wavered, "Not guilty." The gallery gasped, half in shock, half in anger. Morgan's eyes blurred with sudden tears, her body trembling. Elise gripped her arm and whispered, "You're free." Victor slammed his hand on the table, muttering, "Unbelievable." Judge Calder rapped her gavel, "Order." Evelyn sighed with a mixture of relief and grief, whispering, "Leonard's peace may live now." Dominic pressed his palms to his face, shoulders quaking. Kayla whispered into her recorder, "The storm ends in acquittal, but leaves broken ground." Morgan whispered, "Freedom tastes like ashes." Elise whispered back, "Ashes grow new roots." Outside the courthouse, flashes lit the night like lightning. Reporters swarmed, shouting, "How do you feel, Morgan?" She said nothing, only clutching Elise's hand. Victor pushed past, sneering, "Enjoy your hollow victory." Kayla aimed her recorder close, whispering, "Do you think justice was served?" Evelyn stood back, tears running silently. Dominic slipped through the crowd, shadowed and broken. Elise whispered, "Let silence be your shield." Morgan whispered, "If silence is all I have left, then let it scream for me." The cameras devoured her image, every flash carving history into stone. In the quiet of the defense office, Morgan stared at the copies of the wills, pages scarred by lies. She whispered, "My father's name is still chained to this." Elise placed a hand on her shoulder, saying, "Truth won today, even if justice limps." Evelyn entered softly. Leonard wanted harmony, not battles. Dominic sat in the corner, head bowed, whispering, "I let them use me." Morgan closed her eyes, tears slipping. "Freedom doesn't feel free." Elise whispered, "Then we build freedom ourselves." Hale's recorder clicked off, words already set in stone for tomorrow's headline. Later that night, Morgan stood alone outside the courthouse steps, rain dripping from the eaves. She whispered, "Not guilty, but never innocent." The city lights blurred through her tears. Elise's voice echoed in memory. "Ashes grow new roots." Kayla's words lingered. "Justice ends, but stories dawn." Evelyn's sorrow weighed heavy. Dominic's silence lingered like a curse. Morgan gripped the will copies, letting rain smear the ink until they dissolved. She whispered, "This is where it ends, and where it begins." The storm was gone, but its echo carved itself into the night forever.